I'm
to have
well,
you.
thank you. I've had a very hectic week, as you can imagine.
It
Yes.
certainly is. It certainly is for everybody who is looking towards how the situation is evolving and finding some sense out of it. Yeah.
I've been editing the Economist's Asia section this week, so it's been
Okay.
India, China, and it's been the Korea issue as well on top of
Oh
that.
yeah. Yeah, definitely not to miss from the radar the situations that are happening at periphery, because they are equally important. Most headlines are taken away by the India-China situation, but North Korea by no means is settled.
No, not at all.
And they made sure that they were not neglected by blowing up that center.
Yeah.
That's right. Yes,
They want the whole world to see that
cry for
something
attention.
is. Yes. Welcome, Mr. Shashank. I'm President Cass. Good to have you with us.
Very nice to meet you, sir. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you. So we look forward to a very engaging discussion. These are, as always, interesting times, but worrying times.
Yes, indeed. Can I just quickly check? Are we broadcast live to the audience, or are we recorded for later on? What are the logistics of
No,
this?
we are live.
You're live. Okay, great.
It would be live on the CAST YouTube channel as well, and recording would be available afterwards, of course.
And are we live right now, or are we going to go live soon?
We are live now.
Okay.
Now we are live. Yeah.
Hello,
Yeah.
everyone.
So I think we have all the participants, the speakers, but we are just 1 minute behind before we start. So I think as the clock ticks 4, I'll formally start it over.
I think it's time. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the CAS webinar on China-India standoff and its implications for regional security. As you are all aware, after COVID, this is the most discussed subject on the news channels and media and everywhere. So we have a panel of eminent speakers with us to discuss the subject. They are Mr. Shashin Joshi, who is the defense editor of The Economist, Professor Shen Ding Li from Fudan University from China, Lieutenant General Khalid Naim Lodi, retired, who has been our former defense secretary, and CAS's very own Ambassador Jaleel Bastialani, former foreign secretary. So we should have a variety of perspectives on the issue under discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, the incursion on 5th May came as a surprise to everyone, but it was an unpleasant one, a little bit unpleasant one for the Indians. For Pakistan, it appears to be not an unpleasant one, not because we derive any satisfaction from it, but because it diverts India's attention away from Pakistan for a little while. But we will see today what it entails. Ladies and gentlemen, people were doubtful whether a new great game had started. Now there is no doubt that it surely has. China has been moving in parallel on 4 fronts. That is South China Sea, Hong Kong, McMahon Line, and the line of actual control in Aksai-Chin or Ladakh. Many people think that China has taken advantage while the world has been preoccupied with COVID-19. But the Chinese have once again demonstrated a planned strategy to attain its strategic objectives, but doing it discreetly and deliberately. They had categorically rejected Indian action of 5th August 2019. We in Pakistan were surprised at the muted response of the world at large to the same and the measures that the Indian government took in locking up 8 million Kashmiris. Now it's evident that China had a plan and chose the right time to strike. This year, the Indians relaxed their patrols on the north bank of the Pangong Lake. The Chinese took advantage and not only continued their patrols, but they fortified their position along an 8-kilometer stretch of the lake and occupied reportedly 40 to 60 square kilometers of territory, which Indians claimed to be their own. The Chinese had their own claims and also occupied the dominating heights astride the Galwan Valley. So the Indians were left a little bit red-faced by Chinese actions, and the Indians tried to blame it on the differing perceptions of the location of the line of actual control. All analysts have come to the conclusion that India finds itself between a rock and a hard place. The clash on 15 June added to the complexity of the Indian predicament, and now questions are being asked like, number one, why were the Indian soldiers not armed when they went to confront the Chinese troops? Of course, there is a background to that. Were the troops equipped and acclimatized for the anticipated or likely battle? How long will the tussle last? What will it take to restore peace in the conflict zone? What would be the reaction of Russia, the United States, and NATO countries to this problem? And finally, how will Pakistan be affected by the same? And more importantly, what should Pakistan do? Today's panelists will talk about the details and background of this standoff and would surely answer the aforementioned questions and present their prognosis about what can or will happen. What's being conjectured is that the Chinese have linked the vacation of the occupied territory to the restoration of the status quo ante 5th August 2019. Needless to say that Indians have very few options, and Mr. Modi is liable to lose face with Indian citizens who had come to believe him to be a strong leader guiding them to future glory. A spanner has obviously been thrown in the works. So I will stop here and cede the floor to the moderator of the day, Ms. Tara Noor, our Senior Research Associate, who would introduce the speakers and start the day's proceedings. I look forward to those. Thank you.
Thank you, President Cass. Thank you very much for setting the tone for what we intend to discuss today. And to discuss this evolving situation and to assess its far-reaching security implications, as you rightly mentioned that we have 4 worthy speakers with us today for this webinar. We shall start with Shashin Joshi, who is joining us from London. Mr. Joshi is the defense editor at The Economist. Prior to joining The Economist in 2018, he served as senior research fellow at Royal United Services Institute and research associate at Oxford University's Changing Character of War program. He is one of the leading international security experts who are closely following and writing on the issue at hand. So over to you, Shashank. We look forward to how do you provide a broader overview of the situation, where it is right now and where it is heading to, in your opinion. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for having me. It's a real privilege to join you, and I look forward to learning from all of you because it's a very murky situation. We don't have all the facts at hand. We're, of course, only 3 days away from the initial clash. So a great deal, I think, for us to learn. Let me just take a few points in turn, beginning with the crisis itself on Monday night. I think what seems to be clear to me, at least from what facts are available, is that neither side sought the degree of escalation that ultimately transpired. I don't think either side sought an outcome of that magnitude or severity. The proximate cause of the physical fighting seems to have been a disagreement over the implementation of a withdrawal agreement, a disengagement agreement that was agreed between the 2 sides on June 6th, and a specific disagreement over a position on the south bank of the Galwan River. And I think at the beginning of this discussion, if listeners or viewers don't have a map at hand, I would strongly advise getting one, because it's an incredibly complicated geography, and you'll benefit from that. I think what is notable, though, is now within the past 2 months, we've seen at least 3 occasions on which Indian and Chinese units have used extremely serious levels of violence after many, many years in which this was completely rare. There was, of course, a skirmish at Pangong Lake in 2017 that was serious. But as Mr. Sadat pointed out, this is an area where both countries, by mutual agreement, have not carried firearms for decades. And so I think, first of all, we see an extremely worrying deterioration of protocol on both sides that allows an incident like this to take place. On the wider point of the broader standoff that has been occurring since April or May at 3 sites, the Galwan River Valley, or the confluence of the Galwan and Shok rivers, that was the one. Hot Springs, the Hot Springs area to the south is the second, and the north bank of Pangong Lake between what are known as fingers 4 and 8 of the lake is the third site of face-off. There are still competing hypotheses, I would say, as to what caused this. We heard one hypothesis just then about Chinese concern over India's move to revoke the autonomy of Jammu and Kashmir last summer, and the decision in concert with that to separate Ladakh as a separate entity and put it under direct rule from Delhi. And we've seen indications of Chinese concern about that and the implications, although, of course, it's notable that the Indians were very emphatic subsequently in direct diplomatic messaging to the Chinese side that they did not feel this would this changed any of the Indian position with respect to the India-China territorial dispute. I think what has to be mentioned, of course, though, also is the context of construction activity. I think construction activity is very clearly one of the broader triggers in this crisis. As for those who know the military balance in the area will be aware of this, but the Chinese side has, or is acknowledged to have, superior logistics for a wide number of years. It has better rail connections, better roads, and an increased ability to move troops along towards the LAC if necessary, even if India has more troops in aggregate in proximity to the LAC. The Chinese side has had an advantage in mobility. What we've seen over the past decade, and particularly over the last few years, is a heightened Indian construction activity close to the LAC. I don't think we have the evidence to judge whether that has been inside disputed areas or in areas that China would not dispute. I haven't seen evidence that would allow us to adjudicate that clearly. But what is clear, I think, is that some of these projects, notably the north-south road leading up to Daulat Beg Oldi, the airfield that is at the very top of Ladakh, not very far from Siachen, of course, has had military implications, and that some of this activity seems to have been of significant concern to the PLA and to the Chinese government. And I think that in understanding some of the Chinese movements over the last few months, we have to factor in threat perceptions that may have arisen as a result of that. I'd just like to move on then to the question of where we go from here and throw this discussion forwards. So in the short term, I don't think we see a serious risk of significant escalation now. Those listening to Prime Minister Modi's speech may have heard him say some of the usual sort of ad hoc language around the possibility of a befitting response if antagonized and so on. Clearly, emotions are running very high as details emerge over the number of casualties, the nature of injuries, and so on. I think it's possible that those political pressures within India will grow significantly. On the Chinese side, of course, the Chinese government is better placed to, I would say, manage public responses and control the flow of information in a way that I think can control escalation to their liking. But I don't see the prospect of escalation. I think we have to look very, very closely indeed at the statements by both foreign ministries yesterday, both of which said they wish to persist with the disengagement agreement, and both of which pointed to existing agreements. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, both of them used the phrase peace and tranquility on the border, which is, of course, a phrase that's appeared in numerous India-China border agreements over the years. But having said all of that, I think I'll end with two fairly significant points. One of them is that the standoff is not over yet. I think the disengagement agreement is going to be very, very difficult to implement, and it only appears to cover 2 of the 3 sites that were discussed. It appears to cover the Galwan River Valley. It appears to cover the Hot Springs area, but it doesn't cover Pangong Lake. And if we look at some of the analysis published by the Australian Strategic Policy Institute this morning, a very interesting report analysing satellite imagery, we can see that's where some of the most substantial activity has taken place. And I would encourage everyone to take a good look at the analysis of that imagery. So I think we are in for a long standoff that I think may exceed the Doklam standoff in severity and length. And I would be surprised if we've seen the last of these kind of skirmishes or these kind of encounters. The final point, if I may make one more point, do I have a few more minutes, Sitara? Is that fine?
Sure.
Great.
Sure.
Okay, if I can just finish on the sort of broader diplomatic implications. It's very, very clear to me that this is a watershed moment in India-China relations. However one chooses to ascribe responsibility or assess the build-up to these events, I think regardless of any disagreements people may have over that, I think it is going to be an extremely substantial moment with far-reaching implications for India-China relations. For the last 10 years, I think we've seen a more competitive relationship between the two countries in various ways, in South Asia, on India's periphery, relating to the Belt and Road Initiative, on the Indian Ocean, in places like Sri Lanka, the Maldives, in relation to the Pacific and the Quad. But both sides have effectively shared the desire to manage that competition and moderate that competition in the interests of buying time, in the interests of stability, in the interests of development, and I think in the interests on the Indian side of not provoking a Chinese response, which I think has been something of a restraint on Indian behavior over the past decade or so. I think we're going to see an acceleration of many of the trends that we have already witnessed over the past several years. A closer relationship between India and the United States, a tightening of the Quad countries, a China skeptic bloc of India, Japan, Australia, and the United States, a more intense Indian defense effort, including a growth in Indian defense spending. Many of you will know that Indian defense spending has been relatively flat in GDP terms over the last several years, even if it has risen substantially overall. And I think that the president is correct to say that it may entail a reallocation of resources away from the LOC towards the LAC, although, of course, as the military officers here will be aware, many of these are dual use capabilities, configured for use in mountainous terrain, configured for power projection in a variety of ways. So, of course, it will have implications for Pakistan, and Pakistan will be implicated in some senses. But I think that is how I see the Indian response. I think this is going to result in a acceleration of many of those geopolitical shifts that have been kind of restrained over the past several years. And I would be really interested in hearing the views of Professor Shen in how he thinks China may respond in turn to some of those trends. But I do think that they are now looking more and more likely, and that the prospect of a more stable India-China relationship is looking less and less likely. And I'll stop there, and thank you in advance for all of any criticism or pushback you may have to those points.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Shashin, for giving a very nice layout of how situation looks like, as fluid as it is. But of course, that helps in setting the tone and leading us to the next question. As you rightly stated, that there is a mutual willingness to de-escalate and or at least not escalate. But it would be quite challenging to determine the original provocateur in this crisis, who would hold the onus of responsibility to first act. And that would actually indicate that this is certainly going to be a long haul, not something that we might find a solution so quickly or closely. So this leads me to introduce our second speaker, that is Professor Sheng Dingli, who is joining us from China. We are very thankful for you to join us. He's a professor and a former executive dean at Fudan University's Institute of International Studies and former director of Center for American Studies. He would share his views and perspective on China's position. Over to you, Professor Dingli.
Thank you very much. I thank you for your kind invitation. It's a surprise to me that China-India front army had a physical fight. Luckily, no shooting a bullet, but with a fist, probably between 3 to 20 Indian soldiers lost their life. It's very unfortunate. Chinese side seem to have also incurred its own deaths, but the government tried to play down by not leaking from our side. Actually, our government is saying we caught Reuters. There is such an incident. Our Xinhua news agency did not provide a first-hand report. So we say Reuters says there is a fight. From the media, between 5 to 50 Chinese soldiers died. It's terrible. This might be the first time of such an incident for the military deaths since 1975. The two countries have made a great effort not to have such a kind of physical confrontation to happen. Indian protested that China sent its military to Dakla. They threatened if this would go on, Li Keqiang's visit to India would not take place. So China made some effort to make Li Keqiang's visit to, early stage of Li Keqiang's visit. And India protested when Chinese President Xi Jinping came to India, why Chinese military came to the place again. So they have a cold face to Xi Jinping. And to our side, we do have a right to go because in our view, it's disputed. If you don't go, you admit there is no dispute. Whoever who took the place would have the virtual effect that they can occupy this place forever. So we need to go there to show we disagree with you, but we would withdraw our troops. After showing some gesture, it's ours. We don't agree with you, and we have a right to come, but we could manage the dispute by having political talk, and then both sides withdraw our respective military. So this is the way we work with India. First, there is no border. There is no legally cut border that has the bilateral acceptance by both India and China. Second, there might have some LAC, line of actual control. In China's view, this is my line of LAC. And in Indian view, that's their line of actual control. But they may disagree with China's definition of the line. They have even more complaint that China does not tell them where our line lies. Their diplomat met with me in many places to complain why you don't tell us what is your line. And they tell us what is their line. We say, it's your definition, we don't agree. But we have a right to disagree. We need to tell India what is our line, but they don't get our line. So in China's view, we may have never intruded beyond their line to invade them. And we may think they have moved beyond the line of our definition to physically invade us. The two countries agreed. Eventually, the border should be bilaterally negotiated and settled through the principle of turning the current line of actual control into border with some sensible adjustment, which means what China has lost will be forever lost. And what they have gained shall be forever gained. They gained this place around the same time, 1841, when Britain defeated China in Nanking, and they cut our land of Hong Kong. At the same time, India was occupied by Britain, and they got the current Dakhla. And Dakhla was inhabited by Tibetan, and we think Tibetan are Chinese. So we think the same Britain created two trouble. For India, they got the place, and we disagree. And we continue to disagree. But if we really use the consensus that we turn the current situation to a permanent border, China seems to lose something. And they would gain China's acceptance of what they illegally took to be permanently legitimate. That's my personal take. China may disagree to tell them my definition of my line of LAC. And we wait for an opportune time. We may access more of the land, which initially belonged to the Tibetan people, now occupied by India in Dakhla area. And this kind of ambiguous definition, where the line lies, would make China know they actually hurt us, but they think they have not invaded because you never tell us the line. And this kind of game has been played by 20 years. Rounds of security dialogue at the Taipinggu level, at the state council level, Yangjitsi level, have made the principle peaceful resolution, turning the existing line of actual control into the permanent border with sensible adjustment, has led to nothing to happen, because you even don't know how to negotiate to iron out the difference of the line. Therefore, India may say they never invaded China because they don't know how China defines the line. And for us, we may never accept what they have made it clear it's their line. We think it's illegitimate because we have not negotiated. You cannot impose your line upon us. So we are rightful to patrol in the area where we thought that should belong to us. That kind of a game is a source of the confrontation. But eventually, China, India made a compromise. Indian patrol in the morning, China patrol in the afternoon. Don't patrol at the same time, otherwise you would see that they hurt us. This is how we made the latest agreement, which was signed on managing the border area peace. We patrol not to have the same time, but India complained why China build road in the area close to India. They think China may have the right, it's your sovereignty, but it's not good for us. China said it's my territory. But India said Bhutan disagree in Dockland. Bhutan disagree. China said, you should ask Bhutan to tell me, you should not speak for Bhutan. Indians say, so what? 3 years ago, they said, armed force turning the gun to the ground, meaning I will not have shoot a bullet to stop you. And it stays there for 70 days plus. So finally, before the Xiamen BRICS summit, the two countries made a compromise. India withdraw its force first from the land of China, but Bhutan disagreed. And then China withdraw its engineering force, which was building the highway. China said, when the weather is better, I will be back, but China has never been back. So India is nervous. China builds the road close to the border. This is a place India consider it belongs to China because it's a place between China and Sikkim. India annexed the Sikkim, but India should accept this is a line. But why? Without a line which is mutually agreed, India would build similarly its a strategic highway to a place which is so close to China. You don't like us to do this. Why you would do this? So first China should stop them to do it. But they say, it's my place. China said, we don't have a negotiation about where the line locates. How you can impose your definition upon me? I think this is a major reason. You should stop. Then the fist fighting a week ago. Then the both military meet at the division chief level. Indian Lieutenant General, we have Major General. Agreed how to manage their relationship. So it's good, turning bad to good. Now we have a new agreement, which is made at a local level, that neither side should take a provocative action. This time, 2 days ago, China complained. Given the newly agreed agreement, again, their front army passed through the line into Chinese side, and we cannot allow them to violate the latest bilateral agreement. And that generated the very fierce fist fighting that led to the death of many people, young people. It's terrible. So Yang Jiechi had a conversation over phone with Jaishankar, India's foreign minister, saying why your side violated the most recent agreement. So it's your fault. If you continue to violate, then we have to defend it. So we may send more troops to this area. I just read the Chinese official news, Tibetan military zone, Xizang Junqu. We have 5 war zones. Tibetan area, Western war zone, Xibu Zanqu. Then within the Western war zone, we have a number of provincial-based military zones. So we are saying we are staging the real bullet military exercise to send a message. It's real. Next time, it may not be just the fisting, it may be bullet shooting. So our armed forces behind, don't violate your agreement with us again. It's not good for you. But India may make a picture for their own audience. No line that we understand. So we have not divided the line. We cannot allow China to disallow us to build our highway on our side, that China understands it's on our side. Who gave China the right to stop our highway building? So when you trace the history for the last 160 years, from the mid-19th century, China considers that all you have attained is illegitimate. You cannot do more when I'm rising. Yang Jiechi has made a phone call how to manage the relationship. From the media, it seems that both military have been withdrawn from this fist fighting area. If this is true, we will not see an immediate follow-on because they withdraw their troops, we withdraw our troops, like Doklam, they withdraw their troops first, and we withdraw our engineering force second. I don't know if this is true. This is media report. Second, how long, even if it's true, how long this would continue? Maybe after a day, they would send troops back to the place, and we are monitoring, having surveillance, and we will immediately send our troops back. So now we do have the mechanism, but the Chinese complain, they don't follow the mechanism. I'm not sure if Chinese government complaint is right or not, because it's a one-sided story. I prefer to believe, but as a professor and academic, I just take a surface value. You say, but I don't know what if you have said is right. But if it is right, India continue to send. My question is, why they intentionally provoke to violate? You asked China not to build in the disputed place between China and Bhutan because the place is too close to India. China agreed. Why you do? Even if this is the Indian occupied place, why you do? Could you keep more distance? Not to build the highway so close to this sensitive place. And second, when you cut a deal, you have to follow. If you don't follow, whether this is an order of Modi or the frontline military violating his order. So China would keep guessing. If the local military would do this, Modi would lose face. The military did not listen to him. And he also need to defend the military to say, my country is right. He would be in a very difficult situation. But if he want to portray he is peaceful, he ordered the military to cut a deal, but internally he asked the military not to implement the agreement. That would be a serious problem. And China cannot allow India to continue to play this. We may not care. You want to use this to get more American defense support from America, from Australia, etc. And we need to tell Chinese a story. We defend our territory. We would not allow anyone, especially India, to intrude. But since the two troops may have been withdrawn from the place where they engaged, I guess this is the high-level involvement, intervening. Chinese military need to listen to the top leader. And their military need to listen to top leader, not to allow this to recur very quickly. That's good. If my interpretation is right, that's good. Xi Jinping and Modi personally take a stake. They order the military to quit. Therefore, there is no immediate chance to re-fight again. But why Modi would allow the military to make trouble and then intervene? It seems that Modi side has a lot of problem. If Chinese government explanation is right, they intentionally violate our recent agreement. Why? What's the purpose? They think China is isolated. US is present China. Well, China can handle this. They have to be very careful that they may incur another major humiliation. Xi Jinping has made a great effort. He invited Modi to Wuhan. He went to India for the institutionalized informal summit in order to have more freestyle exchange of mind, in order to have chemical reaction. But his effort has not been genuinely reciprocated. So China is challenged. It seems we do not take initiative to hurt India, and we have to defend our rightful interest. It's only my personal interpretation through very limited government release of the facts. Chinese government play down. Don't sensitize Chinese. Don't make Chinese people very nationalized, emotional to push Chinese government to reduce the leeway, maneuvering room of Chinese government. That's very mature. We are not worried if India would continue to push, but at least we would leave room to go back. I hope Indian side would also have a more stable, mature, proactive approach toward diffusing this tension. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I used more than necessary time allocated to me.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Dingley. That was a very useful explanation of what is Chinese view. And you rightly stated that—
One Chinese view, one Chinese,
yeah,
not
of
a Chinese.
Of course. And of course, we totally agree with what you're saying, because not any concrete information is available in the public sphere. And all we can do is understand from the statements, from some of the open source intelligence information that is coming from different sources. But you rightly pointed out that it's more of a perceptual issue as well, because its side of sovereignty is being violated. It's perhaps the issue of that perception remains in the eye of the beholder, since India maintains that this is their territory and they have the right, and so does China. And we'll continue to watch the situation closely to understand which direction it takes. Thank you very much once again. Now this leads me to introduce our next speaker. And we are very honored to have Lieutenant General Naeem Khalid Lodhi, who has joined us to provide an overall an overview of the situation, not only from the military perspective, but also from the repercussions it may have for Pakistan as well. Mr. Lodhi has had an illustrious career in Pakistan Army. He has served on various command and staff and instructional assignments. He has also served as the Defense Secretary. He will share his views on the military dimension of the crisis, as I stated earlier. Over to you, General Lodhi.
Thank you very much. It is a pleasure, and thank you very much for asking me to be a part of this very interactive and important session. Why it has happened, I think it has been amply covered by the last two speakers. I would only like to add two, three political aspects. One was that this abrogation of 370 was declared by Chinese as a unilateral action and was not liked by them. Secondly, we also know that there's a deepening understanding and strategic relationship growing between US and India. And they have a number of agreements, logistic agreement, sharing of intelligence agreement, and interoperability, using each other's facilities. So I think there are about a dozen of agreements which are of very profound nature between these countries. I'm talking about other factors, the underlying factors which could have, created all this bitterness. Then lately, India was objecting to the alignment of CPAC, that it being, passing through disputed territory, and that might have also, been felt by the Chinese as was being felt by Pakistanis. And this, the Daulat Beg Oldie base, which both the speakers talked about, and Chief Air Marshal was also talking about, Air Chief Marshal. That is very significant because actually of all the infrastructure developments which were taking place, this one was very significant, that they built an airfield over there where small, transport aircrafts can land. And then initially it was just a battalion base. It got converted into a brigade base, and now we are hearing maybe 2 brigade base, and it was linked with the all-weather road right from Leh up to this place. So why it happened, I thought I should add these 3 factors also. Of course, along the LAC position is not marked, and all those things which have been talked earlier. And the bitterness was growing because whatever happened in Doklam and then Nepal and all these things. Now, what is the situation now? Today, I think it has been explained, but the significant 2 positions are Dovlan Valley, Dalwan Valley, where the heights are with the Chinese. And according to my understanding, they are still well on their side of LAC. Of course, they have got the heights from where they can overlook that road, which is leading to Daulat Beg Oldie, which means that they can easily interdict that road. It is just, I think, 6 or 7 kilometers away from the position where the Chinese are sitting. So it will be at their will. Whenever they want to interdict the road, whenever they want to stop the traffic, it will be stopped. So they have created a weakness as far as Daulat Beg Oldie base is concerned. Secondly, by Chinese advancing from finger 8 to finger 4 in Pangyong Lake, that gives them a clear, you can say advantage, and they can now freely operate on the lake surface, and they can, dominate that area. Again, in my perception, they are well within their own understanding of LAC, and they have not violated that. So that is the situation. Now, what can happen if we look at the 2 armies? Apparently this is just a tactical level things. Few kilometers, 3-4 kilometers here, there, and then line of control, not line of actual control, not very well defined. So it doesn't really matter. But it is not that way. One thing which I indicated was that Daulat Beg Oldie has been virtually cut. And that is an operational level thing and not a tactical level thing, although even if the move is tactical. So if you compare the armies, there's no comparison. Chinese army is being organized on very modern lines. They are army of artificial intelligence and UAVs and electronic surveillance, and they think on these lines, bigger things. Whereas the Indian army, we all know, is just like our army, I would say, more relying on tanks and guns and such like things. But at tactical level, Indian army could have done better in such a situation. So I would say that it also speaks of the lack of their planning and lack of their, I would say, even tactical acumen to get a beating in just such small skirmishes. But anyway, that has happened. So now, more important thing is that what are the implications, future implications for the region? The first, I think, is that, as I said, that supplies of Daulat Beg, Oldie, they are interdicted. Threat to Gilgit-Baltistan and CPEC route comparatively lowered. And I forgot to mention this thing. This was, yes, I mentioned that this threat to CPEC was also one of the political factors, underlying factors, which created all this, in my opinion. I don't insist on that. But because of the weakening of this base, I think, and also the now presence of Chinese army, whatever you see, that is just the surface of it in a big way, as the satellite pictures show. They have very, vast logistic system just backing up all these areas. So now I think threat to the northern area is somewhat lowered and diluted. Indian forces in IOK, they have been stressed, as it was mentioned earlier also. They have 2 corps over there, 14 corps looking after this area, in which we are having this thing. And the other corps is a little downward in the south. But now, instead of concentrating all the forces against the resistance movement which is going on, or against Azad Kashmir, line of control, I think now they get diluted mentally also and physically also. Chinese assertiveness has been exhibited. Chinese have shown that they mean business, and they will not tolerate any threat to their sovereignty. That has become very clear. Indian forces have been embarrassed, not once but twice. And why do I say that twice? Because one, that they did not realize that to their small actions, which in their own opinion, those were salami tactics, going very slowly in an imperceptible manner, constructing, this infrastructure, whatever they were doing, reinforcing Daulat Beg, Oldie, in a very, in their own opinion, a very benign way. They were not expecting a response, this sort of response from Chinese. So that was their first embarrassment, the way they came, and they came up to the LIC, their perception of LIC. And the second embarrassment was that whatever they did in the last, 3 days ago, I mean, there's no way of, if you really want to even go to talk to somebody, there's a proper way of doing it, and you don't go during night and all that. So just saying that we were going to check whether that, de-escalation is taking place or not, I don't think that was the way of doing it, and that was the time of doing it. So that is a double embarrassment. Now, I think Indian image has been badly battered, and I don't think that they can actually retrieve it, not vis-a-vis China. If they try to retrieve it vis-a-vis Nepal, it will be even worse, because the world will think that, look at them, such a small country with hardly any forces, and they are trying to, brawlize them. So that will also not work. The only thing which can work is to alleviate their embarrassment if they do something to Pakistan, and I will come to that a bit later. I think another implication would be that US would realize that what sort of strategic partner they have selected in the region. They expected them to do something in Afghanistan. India nearly refused, and they showed their inability to do anything, as far as to fill up that vacuum or whatever. And now they must be thinking. So this rethinking can, I think, lead to more equipment coming from American side. They will be selling more equipment. In other words, I can say, as far as India is concerned. So Indian dream of attacking, I think, Gilgit-Baltistan is shattered. Of course, they can still come on the other side, the remaining portion of LOC in Azad Kashmir. One more implication which emerges, the political implication, is that maybe China becomes a party of the overall Kashmir resolution, as the professor also indicated. Now, it is disputed territory, so it is first we thought the world only knew that the importance is only resolution of Kashmir issue between Pakistan and India. Now I think China has emerged as a very legitimate party. So whether it will happen or not, I'm not saying, but this could be one of the outcomes of whatever has happened. India may exploit, as I said, later on I will say, India may exploit to get more military support from US. Yes, they will do that, and may attempt to carry out skirmishes, surgical operations in AJK for the image building, which has been battered very badly. And for that, I think my own take is that they will not do it immediately. Not that they don't want to do it. I think they can't because of certain problems in their, in their forces. They are waiting for Rafale aircraft, which they will wait for that. S-400 anti-ballistic missile system, they would like to be that in place. I think one odd ship has to come from Russia. So it is Indian habit that they prepare 200% before undertaking anything. So their present, browbeating with that is being carried out against Pakistan is just to keep our heads down and to keep us inactive, whatever is happening in Indian occupied Kashmir, which otherwise also we don't want to interfere, because that is an indigenous movement, and we wish them good, and we are very hopeful that it will ultimately succeed, because you cannot, make 10 million people by just putting a lot of forces. You cannot win their minds and hearts, and that is not going to happen. So the end of present crisis, what I see is that Chinese will retain Galwan Valley heights, overlooking road to Daulat Beg and base, virtually cutting the lifeline, thus securing Karakoram Pass. Will not give up point up to Finger 4 as far as the lake is concerned, controlling most part of the lake, and they may concede elsewhere. So this is the overall thing which I see, and ultimately there will be parleys, there will be talks, but I think the things will settle down at these last points that I've mentioned. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, General Lodhi, for a very elaborative explanation of the military aspect, particularly the repercussions Pakistan may have and it may have on the Kashmir problem overall vis-a-vis Pakistan. Now we would move to our last speaker, and we have a very seasoned diplomat, Ambassador Jaleel Bastialani, who is currently, luckily, director at CAS. As well, he has served as Pakistan's ambassador to the United States, Belgium, Luxembourg, and the EU and Australia. Ambassador Jalani also served as the Foreign Secretary of Pakistan, and he has worked as Director General for South Asia and SAARC, Deputy Acting High Commissioner to India and Director India in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as well. With this background, I think his insights on the role of diplomacy in the crisis will be extremely useful part of this discussion. Over to you, sir.
Well, thank you so much. I think most of the important points in respect of this standoff have been adequately covered by the distinguished panelists. I would like to add the following. Number one, we need to be clear that Chinese strategic thought is informed by history and a long-term strategic outlook. It is also firmly grounded in principles and high values. Secondly, I agree with Professor Grizzly that Chinese gesture for peaceful cooperation made for over 30 years towards India have not been adequately reciprocated by India. And it was the buildup of a number of factors which led to the current situation that we are witnessing today. Thirdly, I think the standoff has become more complex and more serious. It has implications not only for India, China, but also the entire region. It has implications for Pakistan as well. From our standpoint point of view, I feel that the hopes of an amicable settlement appears remote, at least for the time being. Why I say so is that one, the clashes that took place that reflect that in which more than 20 Indian soldiers, they were killed and several gone missing. It also shows that contrary to the narrative that we were coming from the Indian side, there was no understanding that was reached between the military commanders of the two countries on June 6. Secondly, I think another important point to note is that the Indian expectations of a solid support from the US or for that matter, the other international actors has not been forthcoming. India's expectations were that being a strategic ally, there will be a forceful statement that would come from the US side, but they had to contend with a statement by President Trump saying that that the US would be happy to mediate between the two countries, something that was not taken seriously by either of the two countries. Secondly, the statement that came from the State Department that has also not generated any enthusiasm in India, because it's only said that it expressed regrets over the loss of lives on both sides, as well as urging the two sides to settle these issues through negotiations. And the third factors, which also is important, that a trilateral meeting that was to take place between Russia, China, and the Indian foreign ministers on 22nd June, that has been called off. I think the options at this stage for Prime Minister Modi are limited. Limited because it has military implications, it has economic implications, and it has also psychological implications for India. Militarily, China is too strong, and any, in case the theater of conflict is expanded, it would certainly have a devastating effect on India. India's economic outlook at the moment, because of COVID-19, as well as because of several other factors, is also, it appears bleak. So accordingly, this tension for India is also not in the interest of India at this stage. And thirdly, there are certainly psychological reasons, because it has revived the memories of the earlier conflicts, particularly the 1962 war, because of which India suffered huge embarrassment and humiliation. So, from all point of view, I think India would be looking for, in the days to come, a face-saving formula, a formula whereby it is able to show it to its public and political opposition that China has shown flexibility. It has blinked because of the steely resolve shown by the Indian Army. Even though no tangible steps have been taken on the LAC, that is the kind of face-saving formula they would be looking for. And this is something which many of the Indian informed analysts, including former National Security Advisor M.K. Narayanan, as well as Shiv Shankar Menon, they are also suggesting the same course of action. One thing which is very important to note is that many of the factors which led to the current standoff, they are relevant to Pakistan as well. They are relevant to Pakistan because Pakistan was, as China was concerned about the repeal of Article 370 and the declaration of Ladakh as a union territory, that also emerged as a major concern for Pakistan. A second factor, which is being flagged by a number of analysts, is the construction of infrastructure by India aggressively, construction of base, construction of road network, and also deployment of troops close to the Karakoram highway. That is obviously a major concern for China, but also a major concern for Pakistan as well. And thirdly, Amit Shah's statement that he gave immediately after the 5th August 2019 Indian action, which Pakistan believes was not only illegal, but also violated the UN Security Council resolutions and Shimla Agreement. His statement that we will retake Aksai Chin was also obviously seen as a matter of concern, because it had implications over the agreement that Pakistan had signed with China in 1963. Similarly, Indian statements on Gilgit-Baltistan, I'm sure that would also be a matter of concern for the Chinese as well as Pakistan. What is the Chinese kind of reaction to the whole thing? I was looking at the statement that came from the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesman. It appears that China is unlikely to vacate the positions, at least the Galwan sector. There is absolutely no indication that any withdrawal will take place for the time being. There is also no indication that withdrawal will take place from the other two sectors. The Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman is very significant because he said that, and I quote him, he said that restoration, that sovereignty of Galwan Valley, it is linked to the territorial integrity of China. Similarly, China has insisted that India stops construction activity in areas claimed by China. China has, as I mentioned, declared sovereignty over this Galwan Valley, which China claims that it has always belonged to China. And there are historical factors which also subscribe to this standpoint. General Lodi has adequately covered the implications for Pakistan. As I mentioned, that most of these factors are also linked to Pakistan, and they're of concern to Pakistan. Pakistan has so far followed a very prudent and sober policy in the face of this crisis. But from our point of view, the important thing is that it has brought back the focus on the illegal 5th August Indian action in respect of Indian occupied Kashmir, which was disappearing from the radar screen because of COVID and many other issues. Secondly, as has been rightly mentioned, that China has been compelled to become a part of the disputed Kashmir. I was looking at his statement made by the Chinese scholar Wang Shida, who said that the recent Chinese actions in line of actual control and annexation of Kashmir by India are linked. India has forced China into the Kashmir dispute, and resolution of India-China boundary disputes have become even more difficult till such time the other issues are also resolved, unquote. So this is the kind of a statement that has been made by the Chinese scholar. Lastly, I would like to mention something that Shashank mentioned. Shashank, in his excellent presentation, mentioned that India and China, they have been moderating their competition for the last at least 1 decade. If we look at the situation that has existed between India and China for the last several years, I think the competition has increased, and a number of factors can be mentioned in order to reinforce this point of view. India is part of an anti-China alliance in the shape of Quad. India is the central pillar of the Indo-Pacific strategy. India is also opposed to Belt and Road Initiative and China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. And India is also kind of opposed to the South Asian countries making overtures or making economic or security deals with China. So these are the kind of, and most importantly, the communication compatibility and security agreement that was signed between India and the US in September of 2018. That is certainly something which would be of matter of great concern, not only to Pakistan, but also to China, because this is an agreement that would also not be seen as a friendly agreement by either China or any other country, because it helps India, this agreement, in case tomorrow there is a conflict between India and China, or for that matter, India and Pakistan. And mind you that this agreement was signed after the Wuhan summit. And the main point in the Wuhan summit was that India will not look at China as a rival, but as a partner. So in case there was a partnership, the kind of issues which have been raised by India over the last several years, they do not really show any partnership. And you know, to the extent that in recent weeks, India has blamed China for the spread of the COVID-19, and has also sought compensation following some of the other countries who have done so at the behest of the United States of America. I will stop here, and then in case there are any question and answer, I think perhaps we could respond to those. But thank you so much. It was a pleasure being a part of this panel.
I hope Sitara is not cut off due to technical reasons.
We may have lost her, I'm afraid. I can't see her on the panelist list.
I'll be very happy to moderate, or maybe Mr. President, you could moderate the session in case Tara is off.
You could do it. There are questions that are listed. There are at least 16 questions that have been asked. And basically, So if we could start from the top.
Could I, Mr. President, could I step in for a minute?
Sure, sure.
Thank you. I just noticed a lot of questions on Article 370, and I think it's worth addressing this. And they cropped up in your initial remarks as well. I think the point that Ambassador Jalani raised about China's positioning vis-a-vis the Kashmir dispute is interesting. As most of us know, for the past 20 years, particularly in the aftermath of the Kargil conflict, China has effectively, in many respects, disappointed Pakistan by the degree to which it has been unwilling to play too active or prominent a role in the dispute. It's been very cautious, and that's part of the reason for that, of course, is the same dynamic that I mentioned, that both sides have been eager to attenuate their rivalry. China has wanted to avoid pushing India into American arms. It's taken a cautious approach on all of this. And I think that it is plausible to say that as Ladakh itself becomes a sort of focal point of some of these disagreements, as it has done in the past month and in a more serious way, that China will take a more keen interest. But I think it is, and this is my own view, I think it is wildly unrealistic to suppose that China would actually be willing or able to compel India to reverse the various constitutional and political changes that it made last year. And I think that that is highly unlikely that China would be willing to even consider that step, not least for the reason that I think it would not have any prospect of success. I think that India will dig its heels in. You know, one doesn't have to favor or support the move in any fashion, I think, to see that it's a matter of considerable political priority for the Indian side, and that they are not going to step back. And indeed, a public or any kind of public Chinese pressure on that, I think, probably makes it even less likely that they would be stepping back. So I think we will see potentially a more active Chinese approach on Kashmir, and that will cause diplomatic problems for India, I think. But I highly doubt that we will see an attempt or any successful attempt to reverse the actions that we've seen. But I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you very much for your intervention. Mr. Shan, would you like to say something on the same question?
Could you remind me what's the question? I was reading.
The question was that Pakistan or citizens of Pakistan or sympathizers of Pakistan expect that China would intervene in favor of Pakistan or would insist on undoing of the abrogation of the Article 370. What Mr. Joshi has said is that in the past, Chinese have disappointed Pakistan in not being able to support Pakistan openly. And in his judgment, that is not likely to change. And obviously, India is not likely to back down on the reversal of, Article 370 or 35A. So, your comments.
Well, I cannot speak for my government, but my sense is we sympathize with Pakistan, and we hope India would treat this issue fairly and friendly, and not in a discriminative way. China may be difficult to speak it openly with a position, but as you know, as always a strategic partner of Pakistan, China sympathize with Pakistan and would, on most cases, would understand Pakistan and would be on the side of Pakistan.
Thank you. If I may intervene at this time, what we need to all understand is that all battles have to be fought by a country itself. America will not intervene on India's behalf, and China will not openly intervene on Pakistan's behalf. You saw the example of Crimea. The entire Western world was opposed to Russia, but other than sanctions, they could do very little, because nobody would put troops on ground for somebody else. So that's a stark reality that we must all accept. And so I'm sure there are secret consultations going on between India and the United States. And I'm sure there'll be some consultations going on between Pakistan and India. And that is how it should be. It has to be discreet. It has to be, kept that way. So we move on to another question, which I had read on the list. There was this question by Air Marshal Wasim, who was asking that there is this wave in India of, boycotting Chinese products, etc. So his question was that what would be the economic impact of something like that on China? Agreed that India is not such a big market for Chinese stuff, and the total trade is about 80 billion, while between India and China, while the total Chinese exports are way beyond that. So if Professor Shen can answer that.
Well, I see some Indian sentiment. They're calling to boycott Chinese selling Xiaomi cell phone in the country, and urging some patriotism. It's understandable. But if they understand the entire picture, if they would know their military made an agreement with China that their military and the Chinese military should neither intrude into the other side of the line. And they cut the deal and they violated. Then the people may look at things more carefully, may not buy the argument, let's boycott. But for Chinese, certainly we don't want them to boycott the Chinese business. But if they want, we can do nothing. We have to accept. But why they buy our stuff now is because it's a cost effectiveness. It's not expensive and it's a quality. If they are willing to buy less quality and more expensive stuff for a wrong reason, for their misunderstanding that China intruded into their place, it's a misunderstanding. And they have three harm. They don't understand, they pay more for less. It's not good for them. It's not good for us. But we have a big economy. We can live with that. They have a less economy. They can also live with it. But it is not sensible. So I hope we need to communicate with them, to tell them, and to let them know what is happening. Probably should not quote the Reuters news. We should provide our own news. And we should publicize country government video. What is our recording that their troops violate? That would be best telling to tell their people that you should be calm, should check and balance the government to honor your international commitment, rather than your government would repeatedly violate and your people would support a government that has lied. So rather than China would quote Reuters, we should provide what we have acquired as a fact. So that would be, I think, be more penetrating and be more effective. That's my view.
Thank you. Sitara, you are back.
I wanted to add something to this trade question.
Sure. Dr. Jilani, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. I'll just take 30 seconds. I think it's a rhetorical statement by few individuals in India to suspend trade with China or to boycott Chinese products, for the simple reason that suspension of trade with any country is detrimental to India's own economy. If last year when India Prime Minister Modi suspended trade with Pakistan, he was subjected to some criticism by some serious economists saying that trade with Pakistan had reached a level of almost $3 billion, out of which 80% share was that of India, and Pakistan had only 20% share, which meant that it was a net loss to India to the tune of about $2.2 billion annually. Similarly, when you're talking about suspension of trade with China, the Chinese-India trade figures are $80 billion, some say it's $100 billion, but then again the ratio is the same. Chinese share is about 70 to 80%, whereas the Indian share is about 20%. But even if it's a 20% share for India, that also means a net loss of about 10 to 15 billion dollars, which India is likely to lose. What I'm trying to say is that India would be a net loser in case it does so, if it takes this course of action.
Okay, thank you, Ambassador Jalani. Then there is a general question. Anybody can tackle it. What are the possibilities that India will do something against Pakistan? A Balakot sort of a strike for face saving after what happened. It has been partially answered, but we could clarify this doubt. Whoever is the person who has asked this question.
If I may,
Yes, if you allow, I can say something about it.
Yes, sure.
My own understanding is that whatever India will do with Pakistan is not necessarily contingent on what has happened between China and India. It has some other factors also, in my own opinion. I think India cannot assimilate occupied Kashmir unless it embarrasses Pakistan in a very big way. And that is only possible if they carry out something of a surgical strike or something of the sort, which is multiplied by media hype, and thus embarrassing the forces of Pakistan and creating hype at international level that this is what we have taught Pakistan a lesson. In their own understanding, they cannot assimilate Kashmir. And as we were talking about the parties of Kashmir, I would like to add that it is not only Pakistan, India, or China. Kashmiris are the major party as far as Kashmir resolution is concerned. So it will not depend on what China wants and what India wants and what Pakistan wants. It will depend a lot also on what the Kashmiris want, and we cannot keep them out. So whenever we carry out any discussion about that who all are going to be parties, I think the fourth party we should keep in mind. Coming back to that, I also think that this is not the right time for Indians to attack Pakistan. And I mean, once I say attack, I know that all-out war is not possible because of the nuclear factor. But the type of war I was just mentioning, whatever has happened, already happened, is happening on LOC and has happened on LAC, something of that type multiplied by media hype, that can happen. In my opinion, if at all India decides to do that, it will be during or after the US elections, so that the world attention is in that direction. And other factors which I mentioned, that they would like to have the Rafale aircraft and S-400 ABM system, and they would like to come only with a lot of preparation. So that possibility is there. Thank you, sir.
So I would simply like to add that it would depend on the kind of face-saving formula that is worked out by India with China. In case the face-saving formula is to the satisfaction of public at large as well as the opposition parties, then the chances of India taking that action would appear to be slim. But in case at a later stage, if any formula that is worked out that is subject to a lot of criticism by the media or political parties, then in order to distract attention, there is a possibility that it may at a later stage take that kind of an action, either on the line of control or in Gilgit-Baltistan.
My perspective is that yes, this possibility exists that India could do this mischief, but the issue is that India's Chinese problem will not disappear. You know, it will be a flash in the pan. The Chinese problem will continue to bother them. So that tells me that the probability of that happening is low. Sitara, you can now take over.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for filling up the role. My apologies to all the panelists and the participants. My connection got lost. I'm sitting in a remote village right now, but that's the beauty of technology, that it has helped us connected not only in Pakistan, but across the world. My sincere apologies. My backup was taking some time to get loaded. Thank you. I would quickly take up from probably, I'm afraid that I have lost the track of the question since my connection was completely gone. But I quickly like to go back to a couple of questions that were addressed to Shashank, and specifically because he has to leave little early, because that was the original commitment that he has to leave somewhere by 5:30. Thank you very much for taking this time out, Shashank. So one question that was asked to you, if you have not answered that already in my absence, was that how do you expand upon that, this being a watershed moment, since that you said that this is going to be a watershed moment between India-China relation, how do you see it from going on from now? And if I add another question from Itfa Khurshid to Shashank, that how do you see change in India's strategic thinking and its approach as India versus Pakistan and India versus China? And if I may quickly add to this, because there is a lot of talk about this construct of Southern South Asia, Southern Asia broadly, not just South Asia, but Southern Asia, which involves India, China, and Pakistan in a triangular relationship. I personally believe that this remains to be two dyads, where India, China competing on one level and India, Pakistan competing on the other level. And if we talk about the strategic chain, US might get involved at another level with China and US. So how do you look at this whole set of questions? Thank you.
Thanks, Sitara. Thanks very much. I'm very jealous of your remote village. It sounds idyllic. Very, very pleasant place. On the watershed moment, what I essentially meant was that the sense of mutual restraint that we have observed in the Sino-Indian relationship, I think will ebb and will loosen over subsequent years. And I mean that in a variety of ways. For many years, for example, India has been cautious about allowing Australia into the Malabar naval exercises, which, as many of you will know, include the United States, Japan, India initially, then Japan became a permanent member a few years ago. And Australia is looking likely to join either this year or very soon, if not. And that's a very significant moment. In 2007, when all four countries took part in Malabar, there was a very, very sharp reaction from China, which used the phrase, as I recall, Asian NATO in 07. But I think we're seeing India loosen some of those restrictions. And on the Chinese side, I think in your absence, we touched on the Chinese position on the Kashmir dispute. And I think we would expect to see a more forward-leaning diplomatic posture on that, even if there's a limit to how far China's willing to go. I would also expect to see some of the same trends we've seen in terms of India signing military logistics agreements, not just with the US, but also with Japan, with Australia, with France, with Australia and other countries. The Indian diplomatic corps is very cautious on these things, right? It moves slowly. The legacy of non-alignment is extremely strong, as Ambassador Jalani will know from his dealings with his Indian colleagues. If you want an indication of this, I would say pick up and read the New York Times editorial, the op-ed by Ambassador Vijay Gokhale, who was of course, the Foreign Secretary of India until very recently indeed, and the Ambassador to China before that. His editorial in the New York Times, published, I think, a week and a half ago, 10 days ago. It's incredible. If you read it, it's not the kind of thing you would expect any Indian diplomat to be saying about China a decade ago. No Indian diplomat would publicly say something like that in terms of his concern about a Chinese-led world order, the significance of the US having to balance against China. This is stuff that I think is extremely unusual and you don't have to agree with it to realize that it represents a rupture in Indian thinking. And I think a moment like this, which catalyzes many of these Indian concerns around China, is going to accelerate that in a significant way. I think in terms of your second question about strategic thinking, I've probably addressed that to some extent. But what I would say is that the remarks made by the Indian Chief of Army Staff, General M.M. Naravane, about, I think, a few months ago now, are also suggestive in that he was very clear that I think his phrasing was, we have prioritized for a long time the Western border, and now we will be reprioritizing. And I think that this is something to pay close attention to. It's worth paying very close attention to the way in which India may resuscitate and prioritize the Mountain Strike Corps, 17 Corps, that it has been developing at a very slow pace. It hasn't been prioritizing the Mountain Strike Corps, but I think one interesting indication of a change in Indian priorities would be how we see the Indian government signal and engage with the Mountain Strike Corps in the coming months. So pay very close attention to that. And I think the way in which it engages in countries like Bhutan, Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, the Maldives, in terms of that Southern Asian strategy, is also going to be very interesting to see as an indication of how far it is pivoting away or reallocating its diplomatic attention from Pakistan issues to China issues. Of course, it's not an either or, and as events in Kashmir and the relationship with Pakistan fluctuates, we'd expect to see India keep an eye on that. But I think we're going to see a reorientation of Indian military and diplomatic attention towards China in a more meaningful way over the coming years. And I think the Wuhan agreement, just my final point, the Wuhan agreement, I think one of our speakers made the point that it said that India would not treat China as a rival, but a partner. Well, actually, I think that the Wuhan agreement was a sort of a sticking plaster. It was a plaster over a wound. It was a temporary kind of salve. And I think that it's being stripped away in many respects. It did not suspend Indian-China competition. It mollified it, and I think that is now going to effectively cease in ways that we will see over the next few months. And on that note, I'm afraid I have to leave, but can I just thank you very much for having me and for allowing me to share my views with this distinguished panel and a very thoughtful audience as well.
Thank you very much for your time, Shashank. We totally understand. And thank you again for chipping in and adding to this very important detail. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you from my side also for sparing.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
So with rest of the speakers, I think we'll continue for another 20 minutes or so. If I may quickly add a couple of questions to one question that is from Mahin Shafiq to all the panelists. This is with regards to, in case the tension between China and India escalates to a war, what sort of support Pakistan will provide to China, if any? If all the panelists wants to take it, or Dr. Dingley, you want to take it first?
Well, first, I don't want to have a war.
Yeah, that's it. Totally
Second,
agree.
with or without a war, we count on Pakistan. And Pakistan has never failed China's expectation, Chinese government and the peoples. And personally, I hope Pakistan will become, wait and see. You have many ways to help China, not necessarily the military way. And, but military way may be a way. So I expect Pakistan will be reliable, but first of all, I hope China will not bother Pakistan, because we are able to find what Ambassador has said, a face-saving way. My proposal for a face-saving way is to build a kind of inter-Korea DMZ. Demilitarized zone. We have to define a zone, because China has its own LAC, which is not clearly expressed. India has expressed its LAC. And these two LAC must be different. Otherwise, we, China and Pakistan, India should be able to settle that disagreement. It's different. What about to define a large area that cover such a disagreement? And both military would quit to only allow civil government, police, some non-military people to administer on Chinese side, on Indian side, on overlapping side to cut a deal. Like North Korea and South Korea, they have had trouble for ages. But because of the design of DMZ, they avoided a major conflict. Recently, they want to destroy DMZ by tearing down those military posts. 12 out of 13 posts have been withdrawn. But with the blowing up of the liaison building 2 days ago, probably North Korea would rebuild this military post. I hope they will not. They will find some management with President Moon in South Korea. In their DMZ, personnel, military, non-military cannot enter. But if China, India can build a DMZ, people can enter, but military personnel cannot enter. With certain verification, some dispute settlement mechanism. So China and India may forever unable to settle their border dispute, but they will be able to manage their difference in a non-military, non-violent way. So that's my proposal. But India may disagree. They want to push China to have a settlement. Before China would rise to its more important status, they want to cut a deal with China. And China may think, since I would rise to a more imminent position, why I would cut a deal now? I just don't want to tell you where my line of actual control lies. I don't tell you. If I tell you, I need to base this line to draw the permanent border that would undermine my future interest. That might be China's strategic calculus. And India think time is not on its side. They want to push the envelope. This is my personal take. I hope both countries should not think we should have a line to negotiate and permanently cut a border in a foreseeable time. But what about to build a peace mechanism for permanence? So I hope India and the Chinese need to take this kind of a challenge to find a solution. Chairman Mao Zedong used to say, turning a bigger chaos to a bigger governance. 从大乱到大治. A bigger governance is peace, forever peace, without settling the border dispute. Then that can make in Pakistan to have more challenge. India would relocate its resource to its front with Pakistan. But that can also benefit Pakistan. China can relocate more resource to strengthen our CPEC, to strengthen our strategic partnership. So everything has a challenge and opportunity. So if China, India fight, you fight, India fight 2 wars, I don't think this is something that I want to have. I don't want to have a war with India. We don't care a war, but we don't want to have a war. But if India would impose a war, fine. If Pakistan would care not to come, great. But most likely it will do something. And we may appreciate.
Thank
you very much.
Because it is a hypothetical question, so I would like to give a one-liner hypothetical answer. I hope Pakistan will not repeat the blunder of 1962.
Thank you. Thank you for this quick take. Yes, Ambassador Jalani, please.
I share the assessment and the aspiration of Professor Zingley. I would simply add that that in case there is a war between India and China, China is strong enough economically and militarily to take care of India. And in the assessment of many international analysts, including the Indian analysts, in case of a war, it would be, the situation for India would be much worse than it suffered in 1962. As far as Pakistan is concerned, both China and Pakistan, they have stood with each other to face such challenges. Pakistan certainly would extend wholehearted moral and diplomatic support to China at all international forums.
And also material if required.
Thank you.
And also material if required.
True.
Thank you, sir. This leads us to, I think we would now include the last set of questions. There are a few more questions with regards to one particular question, which probably again is directed at the whole panel. What would be somewhat relevant to what previously said, but what would be the implication of Chinese-Indian rivalry in Afghanistan, given both are involved there? What can be, or are the repercussions there? And if I may add another question from former Ambassador Masood Khalid received through email, and that question probably is directed at General Lodhi. In recent clash, Indian Army's unprecedented and inefficient command and control has come under severe criticism in India. Do you think this particular factor could discourage India to launch a misadventure against Pakistan? Ambassador General Lodhi, probably you can look at the first part. How do you assess India's preparation vis-a-vis China in the recent clash, and then how much it impact badly or good or bad, worse in whatever manner towards Pakistan? First question to the panel. Maybe we can start with you, General Lodhi.
Thank you very much. I think it all depends that how India perceives itself to be. I mean, this is what we are saying, or somebody is saying that they have any weakness in their command and control, or they have any weakness in their tactics, or whatever it is. How have they perceived it? Because we have not heard their version so far. If they have not realized what has actually happened, then I think all the more reason that there's a higher, one can say, probability of they coming for us, because realization is the first thing. Whenever you want to correct something, the first thing is that you must realize that what is the problem. And I don't think that whatever I keep listening to their higher command, two-front war, and doing, capturing Gilgit-Baltistan and capturing Azad Kashmir, even at the highest level, if some major or captain is saying that, one can understand that, because that is, out of your passion and all that. But if the generals talk like this, that they think they can go for open wars with nuclear countries, then probably you can expect anything, because that means that they are the people who are actually going to direct that war. They are the people who are going to start that war. So their understanding is actually very important. But in my own reckoning, I think whatever they say openly to the media or wherever, in their own hearts, if they have really learnt lessons from history and learned lessons from strategy, they would realize their weaknesses, which are very glaring. It was very obvious once they came for Pakistan, and now it has become even more obvious once they went for China. So I think they need 4 or 5 years to keep preparing for something before they do something new. Yeah.
Thank you very much, sir. Ambassador Jalani, do you want to add to that? That particular part, if how India-China competition may play out in Afghanistan, since both are claiming some role over there. Can that be an additional theater?
Well, the way things are progressing in Afghanistan, it appears that in any future dispensation, India will have not a significant role in Afghanistan. In case there is a government in place as a result of intra-Afghan dialogue, which is an inclusive setup, then I think in that kind of a situation, perhaps China would be able to undertake many of those projects that it had initiated in the last couple of years, but could not be advanced due to the security situation in Afghanistan. India will have in the future dispensation not much role in the Afghan affairs. It will continue to play the role of a spoiler as it has always played. But again, that is something which is not of, would be of any major concern for China. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. Do you want to add something to China-India competition in Afghanistan, Professor Dingley?
Afghanistan needs international support for its economic recovery and reconstruction. And as its neighbor, China, India should be important for such international effort. And for China and India would have a bigger challenge between themselves. Firstly, I'm sure it is not helpful for China-Indian cooperation in the area of Afghanistan. As to how much, to what extent this is unhelpful, I cannot predict. I can only predict that China-India wholehearted cooperation to help Afghanistan rebuild itself would be less opportune. China would continue to join internet effort, but how to have a setting with India and China together wholeheartedly, geostrategically, that may be a challenge. That's all.
Thank you. And if quickly I may ask you, there is this one question from Umar Akram that is asking, is the new crisis a part of the grand strategy? How India, China, because what is happening, what Shashank rightly pointed out, that this is a watershed moment and something that is, even if the current hostilities are subsided, the implication would actually stay for a longer period of time and would actually contribute in the great powers rivalry, not only in the region, but at the broader level, because not only because of Chinese aspiration, India's aspiration, and American aspiration in the region. So how do you see this new crisis a part of grand strategy? What alliances could possibly form, and or this could actually potentially impact the formation of new alliances or strengthening existing alliances? Maybe we need to see or focus on role of Russia in this overall regional security alliances or regional debate.
It's hard to conceive India has a grand strategy through this fashion. When you have strategy, you should have an objective. I respect India deeply, but I don't think India can benefit from such a kind of confrontation. They can get 0 inch of land from what China has believed to have already been under China's control. They don't have the capacity to get more land, and they would incur lots of its own cost, human cost, military cost, financial cost. They can bring trouble to China to make us to incur cost. And also, I don't think through this kind of confrontation, China should be able to get some or a lot of land that has already been occupied by India. So it's hard to believe China would have grand strategy to get something that it is impossible to get. and India would pay a big cost to get to nothing. No one would be so foolish to design a strategy that you cannot achieve its objective. Where for strategy, the object, the resource, and how to allocate resource to attain your objective. India may think it has lots of resources that China may lack. India does trust that China has lots of resources, but given China resource, China cannot achieve its purpose. If China would have purpose to make what has been under Indians' control to be under China's control. So China's resource may not be enough to achieve such a wrong grand strategy. And India may not even have the resource to achieve a strategy that will be mistakenly conceived. But other country may have a grand strategy because that can check and balance China to make China busy. And some country, say, may have a problem to see China's rise in such a way. In the year 19 years ago, the year 2000, China's GDP was $1 trillion US. In 2002, Party Secretary Hu Jintao made a plan. By the year 2020, this year, we should quadruple our GDP compared with the year 2000. Namely, 2020, we should achieve the target of GDP $4 trillion US. By last year, we already achieved 14.4 trillion US. We achieved the purpose 1 year earlier with additional 10 trillion added. No one would doubt China would have resource, but this resource is not enough to achieve, if China has a plan, to convert what has been under India's control to be under China's control. So China must not have such a grand strategy. We want to make India to be sensible, don't have a grand strategy to achieve what you cannot achieve. So why you send those troops violating the agreement and achieve nothing? Don't do. It's not good for China, and fundamentally, it's not good for you. So I think India should, if it's smart enough, it should not have such a grand strategy that may be illy conceived. I cannot believe China would have a strategy to check and balance India this way. But if China and India would be trapped in their standoff for a long time in a military confrontational way, that can benefit some country to make them feel less pressure due to the China's great achievement, 1 trillion to 14 trillion in 19 years. They really feel pressure. So if India can make China busy, make China to rise less imminently, that's good. So they must have a plan. And they don't want to pay a cost by themselves. But if India would like to pay its own cost to help other countries, this may be a grand strategy. But that needs India to be willing to voluntarily to help other countries, because that country does not want to pay its own cost. So India needs to be smart while you help other countries' grand strategy without benefiting yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Dingley. If I may direct to Ambassador Jalani with the same question, but I may not help but ask the role of nuclear weapons in that regard as well, because if we look at, and your concluding remarks on this particular aspect of the grand alliances and grand strategy with the presence of nuclear weapons as well, because we have seen that nuclear weapons between the India-China dyad has played a stability role, mainly because they both have declaratory no first use, as well as the way their nuclear posture are developed. But recent talks of India's evolving nuclear posture, as well as the talks of giving up its nuclear no first use option, does that also indicate to a major shift in India's policy, not only vis-a-vis Pakistan, but vis-a-vis China, and also part of grand strategic designs? Your last comments on that.
Well, I would say that the grand strategy of the kind that is being talked about, which involves confrontation, either a conventional confrontation or a nuclear confrontation between India and China, that is not certainly in the interest of either China or, for that matter, India. I think for India, it is extremely important to focus on the economic revival, because that unless it does that, it will not be able to become a part of the kind of strategies that have been evolved even by the United States of America. Nuclear weapons, I was reading a report recently whereby some kind of a competition in the nuclear area has increased between India and China. I think that is again something which would be of concern to a lot of countries. So this is what to conclude, I would say that this is something which is not in the interest of either of the two countries.
Thank you very much, sir. With this, I think we have to close today's session as well. My sincere apologies to any participants whose questions have not been addressed whose question have not been made part of the discussion, primarily because of the shortage of time, and also because the connection problem that I had in between was slightly challenging the whole conduct. With that, I would go back to the President Kaz for his concluding remarks. So please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Sitara. I must thank all the speakers. You did a wonderful job, brought a lot of clarity, and the presentations were insightful. And the discussion that followed was engaging. As is always the case with webinars and seminars, there's never enough time to answer all the questions, But I'm confident that all of us walk away from here very educated and well-informed. I will highlight a few points that have been made during the presentations, just a few of them, and also add some of mine in the end, and I promise to be very brief. Mr. Joshi started off with that this clash appeared to be unintentional, and the standoff is not over yet, and it is a watershed moment. This watershed issue has been discussed during the Q&A. What it means is that there is no going back to the old ways, because it's a rupture that has been created in this relationship. I don't know whether it is a Chinese saying. They say that you can make Chinese soup out of an aquarium, but you can't make an aquarium out of a Chinese soup, So this is how it is irreversible. And that is what is meant by watershed moment. Insofar as Professor Shen is concerned, he brought a lot of clarity insofar as Chinese stance is concerned over this standoff, over the clashes that have taken place, and what China is looking out for. China is not looking for a war. It doesn't want to escalate the situation, but it also wants to, is very confident and very determined that it will not give in to Indian demands, because what they perceive to be the line of actual control, and the Chinese don't agree with that, they will not be able to force China to accept that. And this, the main problem, as we have come to realize, is that the root cause of the problem is that the Indians claim that the India-China border is 3,340 kilometers. The Chinese say that it is no more than 2,000. The rest is all line of actual control. you know. So that has to be negotiated if you ever want to revert to a peaceful coexistence. And that's the point that is very important to understand. And another important point that he has made is that China-Pakistan relations have been strong, will remain strong, and they have been mutually supporting each other in all crises, in good times and in bad times. And that is a reassurance that that is good to hear for Pakistanis at least. And of course, he also made this point that any provocation that will come from the Indians, and it will be responded to in appropriately. And I only wish that Indians will understand this. General Lodi made the point that the incursion appears to be small, but it may appear to be tactical, but the effects are operational. The road going from Darbuk to Sheok to Daulat Beg Oldie has strategic connotations. So the gains made by Chinese may be 8 kilometers linear, 40 square kilometers in area, but the effects that it will project on the future strategy of the region will be strategic. And also he made another very important point that Indian image has suffered, both political thinking as well as the military execution. That image has suffered, and it will take a while for it to recover. And Ambassador Jalani traced the history of Chinese and Indian relationship, and he emphasized the point that China has always thought that India and China should be cooperative, and there should not be a rivalry between them. But as things stand, the things are moving in quite the opposite direction. So these were the points that have been made by the speakers. A few points from my side. What we have learned today is that India wants to keep the spotlight away from this tussle. The Indians are adapting the same trick that they played after 27th of February. However, the difference is that they can show their bravado to Pakistan only and make their people believe in fiction of shooting down Pakistani F-16. But here they have lost territory, and that cannot be denied. Also, like last year, after the aeroplanes landed back on ground, at their respective bases, the operation had ended. In this case, the Chinese boots are on ground on perceived Indian territory, and they have lost 20 soldiers. So neither the media nor the government can deny that. The challenge is how to find an amicable way out, how to persuade Chinese to retreat. The conditions that China wants met are hard to gulp for India. As usual, India will do something silly, maybe against Pakistan, to divert attention from embarrassment. This point has been made by most of the speakers. And my reply to that was that they could do this, but their Chinese problem will still stay where it is. You know, it will not help that purpose. It will be, if at all, a very, very temporary relief, and they could even aggravate their problems vis-a-vis Pakistan. So to my judgment, that probably at this particular moment is remote. But the frustration of the Indian side is quite evident that last Wednesday, the Twitterati, they had said that there was blackout in Karachi, there was panic in Karachi, and the Indian Air Force had flown in attack formation, and one F-16 had been lost at sea, etc. I mean, none of it ever happened, but just because they can't achieve everything on ground practically, they indulge in this kind of fiction all the time. And the venom and the abuse that they hurl against Pakistan is quite egregious. And also India's dream to isolate Pakistan diplomatically, but as things have turned out, they have territorial disputes with many of their neighbors, as was highlighted by all the speakers. and they find themselves isolated in the region. So the effects have been opposite. And very important lesson that they need to understand is that, like everything else in life, power is also relative. You know, they may be stronger than Pakistan, but they are weaker than Pakistan. Look at their tone when they give out statements against China. You know, they're so meek, they're so humble, they are so diplomatic. They don't want to use a word that could offend the Chinese. And the data that was just narrated by Professor Dingley, the difference between the military power and economic power is so huge that I don't think India can act cheeky with them. The rupture, etc., is obvious that President Xi had emphasized on Prime Minister Modi that this rivalry should end. But with passage of time, India has leaned more and more towards the United States and towards Quad. And out of this standoff, like Professor Jingli pointed out, India seeks to acquire military equipment and aircraft and things like these. But that's the only game. No, and like I said earlier, America will not fight for India. India will have to fight for itself. Indian opposition to BRI and CPEC also directly threatens Chinese interests, which is a major irritant for China. This was a point made by Ambassador Jaleel also. And also India joined the Western calls for a transparent investigation into Chinese government's role in the spread of COVID-19 globally. So all said and done, the situation as it obtains at the moment is that it presents two challenges to Pakistan. One is that the day of reckoning for Pakistan to choose sides in this new Cold War is getting closer. India has decided to choose sides. Pakistan still remains undecided. You know, that's very important for Pakistan to understand. It must decide. We are at a Y-fork and it is decision time. India has openly accepted that it is going to be on the other camp. What is Pakistan going to do? That's a decision that is to be made. The continuing risk against Pakistan to shift media and public attention, this has been said many times, so, and I've remarked on that. What needs to be, we can only hope that Mr. Modi may have learned a thing or two from this episode, and he would not make the bad regional security situation even worse. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you all for your time, attention, and participation. I am indebted to our speakers, both from Pakistan and abroad, for making it a worthwhile exchange of ideas and knowledge. And thank you very much for sparing your time.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Stay safe.
Thank
you,
you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Enjoyed this discussion.
Thank you.